They say the worst betrayals don't happen in the heat of passion. They happen in the quiet. In the soft, harmless moments that don't feel like much until they do. It's been 2 years since that afternoon. Since I offered him something I never imagined I'd say out loud. Something that still sits in the back of my throat like a secret I can't swallow. It didn't happen in some hotel room. It didn't happen in the dark. It happened in my own home. With the sun pouring through the curtains and a silence so loud I couldn't pretend I didn't hear it anymore. I didn't plan it. I didn't set out to destroy anything, but when you go too long without being seen, without being touched, without being wanted, you start to ache in places no one talks about. Daniel was away. Again. Another business trip. Another weekend alone. The kids were with his parents. And I was sitting in that quiet house, just me and the echo of everything we stopped saying to each other. Then Liam showed up. His best friend. The one who'd been around since before we were married. The one who used to feel like a brother. The one who looked at me that day, like he knew something was unraveling inside me. We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch. But something happened. Something shifted. And I said it. I said something I shouldn't have. I asked him, what if we just didn't pretend today? I don't know why I said it. I don't know what I wanted from him, but I meant it, and he knew I did. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just looked at me, and in that silence, everything changed. I've lived with that silence ever since. Not because of what we did, but because of what we almost did. This is the story of the day I was left alone with my husband's best friend. And suggested we do something that still haunts me. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where silence turns into stories too heavy to carry alone. I didn't expect to be alone that weekend. Daniel had another last-minute trip, New York this time, or maybe Chicago. I don't even remember anymore. The destinations blur together when the man you married keeps chasing boardrooms instead of coming home. The kids were with his parents. A planned sleepover. They were excited. I was numb. I told myself it would be nice to rest. To have the house to myself. But by noon, the silence started to feel heavy. Not peaceful, just loud in all the wrong ways. I moved from room to room, picking up toys no one asked me to touch, wiping counters that were already clean, trying to fill the space Daniel left behind. And then Liam showed up. He didn't knock like a stranger. He walked in like he belonged, like he always did. He smiled and said, he told me to check on you. Said you might need a break. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because Daniel hadn't said a real sentence to me in 2 days. Liam was the kind of man who knew how to make a room feel warm. He talked with his hands. He remembered birthdays. He noticed things. Things Daniel hadn't noticed in years. He asked me if I'd eaten. He said the house smelled like lavender. He looked at me like I was still in the room. And the worst part? It didn't feel strange. It felt easy, familiar, like something I didn't have to work for. If I'm honest, the house didn't feel unfamiliar with him there. That's what scared me. Because Liam had always been around. Barbecues, game nights, holidays. He was part of our life, my life. But lately, Daniel barely was. He stopped noticing when I cried quietly in the bathroom. Stopped asking if I was okay. Stopped reaching for me at night. I became background noise. A wife who folded laundry. Who kept the fridge full and the kids clean. A body that existed beside him, not with him. So when Liam sat across from me on that couch, feet up like he belonged, talking like we hadn't missed a beat, something inside me cracked just a little. I asked if he wanted tea. He asked if I wanted to talk. I said I was fine. He said, you don't look fine. I don't know why that broke me. Maybe because he meant it. Maybe because I hadn't heard sincerity in a long time. There was a stillness in the room after that. Not awkward. Just heavy with something unspoken. Something waiting. And I sat there, legs crossed, heart thudding in a rhythm I hadn't felt in months. Because for the first time in a long time, someone looked at me, like I was still there. He said Daniel had asked him to check in, that he was just passing by, making sure I was okay. But he didn't leave. He stayed. Told me he had nowhere else to be. Said he could keep me company if I didn't mind. I told him I didn't. But the truth is, I needed the company more than I wanted to admit. We sat in the living room. The same room where I used to nurse my babies. Where Daniel and I once curled up watching Sunday night shows, legs tangled, hearts full. That felt like someone else's life now. I asked Liam what he wanted to watch. He said, "You pick. I'll pretend to like it." And I laughed. Genuinely. That surprised me. We settled on some old movie we both barely remembered. I poured a glass of wine. Then another. He said I hadn't laughed like that in a while. I told him I hadn't had a reason to. Somewhere between the second act and the third, my feet were tucked beneath me, his arm was stretched across the back of the couch, and the air between us felt warmer than it should have. It was innocent. Technically. But there was a shift. Not loud. Not obvious. Just a flicker. The kind of flicker you try to ignore. But it lingers anyway. A scene came on funny, awkward, slightly romantic. He made a comment under his breath. Something playful. Something I'd expect from him. But this time, I didn't just laugh. I felt it. The way his eyes stayed on me a beat too long. The way mine didn't turn away. It was just a movie. Just wine. Just a joke. But something changed in how he looked at me. Or maybe, in how I looked at him. I turned to say something. I don't even remember what. But he was already watching me. And then he said it soft, but clear. "You've changed." I smiled. Pretended it was a compliment. Made a joke about getting older, about stress and gray hairs. He didn't laugh. He said, "No, not like that. There's something in your eyes. You don't hide it anymore." I pretended to laugh again. But inside, I wanted him to say more. He asked me how I was. Not in passing. Not like it was just something to say. He looked into me, like I might fall apart if I answered honestly. I didn't know what to say. Because how do you explain that you've been slowly disappearing, piece by piece, and the person who's supposed to love you most hasn't noticed? I thought back to the last real conversation I had with Daniel. It was about groceries, milk, diapers, and whether or not the plumber had fixed the leak in the downstairs bathroom. No, how are you feeling? No, are you okay? Just logistics. Like we were business partners in a house we shared out of habit. I had tried once. Tried to tell him I felt far away. Tried to say I missed us. But he'd looked at his phone halfway through my sentence. Mumbled something about being tired. Said we'd talk later. Later never came. I stopped asking. Stopped trying. And eventually I stopped hoping. But Liam noticed. He noticed I'd changed my hair. He said the darker tone made my eyes look deeper. Daniel hadn't said a word about it. He noticed the scar on my wrist from when I burned myself cooking last month. Asked if it still hurt. Daniel had never even seen it. He noticed how quiet I got when the laughter died down. How my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. And in that moment, sitting on the couch, half a movie playing in the background, his gaze holding mine like I might shatter, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Seen. Not desired. Not seduced. Just seen. And it scared me. Because being seen like that, when you've been invisible for so long, it does something to you. It makes you ache in places you forgot you had. Was it wrong to want to be looked at like that? Or was I just tired of feeling like wallpaper? Like something you hang up once and then stop noticing altogether. He didn't touch me. Didn't cross any lines. But his eyes, they held questions. And my silence held answers I didn't want to admit. The movie ended, but neither of us moved. The credits rolled in silence, flickering across the room, but it felt like we were somewhere else entirely, somewhere far from the safe walls of friendship and history. I asked him if he remembered that night, the one when Daniel forgot my birthday. Liam nodded before I even finished the question. You were in tears, he said. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know if it was my place. I told him it always felt like no one ever did. That I got used to swallowing disappointment until it didn't even sting anymore. He turned to face me fully then, legs folded beneath him like we were teenagers again. Late-night secrets, quiet truths. Only this wasn't harmless. This wasn't light. He asked when I stopped being happy. And I told him the truth. The day I realized I was married to someone who couldn't tell when I was pretending. It spilled out of me how I once stood in the kitchen, suitcase packed, kids asleep upstairs. How I stared at the front door for almost an hour. How I didn't leave. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know where I'd go. Liam didn't speak right away. Just looked down, then back at me. And when he finally did speak, his voice was low. You're not the only one who's felt invisible around him. He said Daniel never saw him either. Only called when he needed something. Only invited him around when it made him look good, never because he genuinely cared. I've been his shadow for years, he said. The one who claps for him, but never gets clapped for. Something tightened in my chest. Because we were two people, bound by the same man, and forgotten in the same way. We laughed then. Not out of joy, but out of something else. Something sharp and aching. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. And for a second, his hand lingered. Just long enough for the air to change. I didn't move. He didn't speak. But everything changed. My breath caught in my throat. The space between us shrank without either of us leaning in. My heart beat louder than the silence. And when I finally looked away, I realized I wasn't scared of what he'd do. I was scared of what I wanted him to do. That realization hit harder than anything he could have said. Because this wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a choice. One I hadn't made out loud, but one I had already begun making in my heart. The silence after he brushed my hair away didn't settle. It lingered. Pressed against the walls. Pressed against my skin. Like something waiting to be broken. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the years of being untouched, unheard, unwanted. Maybe it was just the way he looked at me. Not like Daniel. Not like I was someone to be managed or maintained. But like I was someone who still mattered. Someone he saw. I didn't plan to say it. I didn't even know I would until it left my lips, soft, barely above a whisper. What if we did something reckless? Just once. He blinked. Sat back. His jaw clenched, but his eyes didn't leave mine. He searched my face like he was looking for the part of me that still knew better. Are you sure? He asked. But it wasn't really a question. It was a lifeline. One last chance to walk away. I didn't answer. I just leaned in slowly, like even time had started to hesitate. He didn't stop me. Didn't lean back. And when our lips met, it wasn't passionate. It wasn't frantic. It was gentle. Heavy. Like grief. We stayed there for a breath too long. Then another. Until suddenly, he pulled away. His hand covered his mouth. He stood. Paced. Ran both hands through his hair. I love Daniel too much. His voice cracked. But I don't think I can pretend anymore. I didn't move. Didn't chase him. Because I couldn't tell which part of me wanted him to stay and which part needed him to leave. We didn't sleep together. But we did something worse. We confessed. Without saying it aloud. And once it was spoken, once it existed between us, in that room, in that silence, there was no going back. Don't miss what happened next. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold to stay in the story. Liam left without another word. No goodbye. No explanation. The door closed behind him with a softness that felt louder than any slam. And just like that, he was gone. I sat on that couch for a long time. The movie menu looping. The wine glass half full. Everything in the room looked exactly the same, but nothing felt the same. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just sat, trying to breathe around something that suddenly felt too big to carry. Daniel came back the next evening. Same suitcase. Same tired smile. He kissed my cheek and asked how the weekend went. I said it was fine. He didn't look up from his phone. We ate dinner in silence. He talked about flight delays and meetings that ran long. I nodded at all the right moments, but my mind was somewhere else, or maybe it was nowhere at all. Days passed. Then weeks. Liam didn't come around. No texts. No casual visits. And I started to change. I was quieter. Colder, maybe. Detached, definitely. Daniel noticed. One night, over dinner, he asked why Liam hadn't stopped by in a while. Said it was unlike him. Said he hoped everything was okay. I told him Liam was just busy. That work had picked up. But my voice cracked. Just barely. But enough for Daniel to look up from his plate. His eyes narrowed. Not in suspicion, in confusion. Like he was trying to connect dots he didn't even know existed. I looked away before he could ask anything else. And in that moment, I realized something painful. I couldn't tell if I was mourning what didn't happen or what almost did. If I was aching for the kiss we didn't take further, or for the part of myself I'd opened and couldn't close back up. Everything between Liam and me remained unspoken. But silence has weight. And I was carrying all of it. I started writing again. Not stories. Not letters. Just thoughts, half-finished sentences in a journal I kept hidden beneath the bed. I wrote every night. Even when I didn't have the words. Even when all I could manage was a sentence or two that ended in silence. I wrote about that moment. The pause between us. The way his breath felt too close and mine felt like it didn't belong to me. I wrote about Daniel. How he used to bring me coffee in bed. How he used to kiss my forehead like it meant something. I wrote about how long it had been since I felt wanted. Not out of duty, not out of routine, but deeply, fully, like someone who mattered. And then I wrote the question I was too scared to say aloud. Did I cheat? I didn't touch him, not really. We didn't undress. We didn't cross that line. But it felt like betrayal anyway. Not just to Daniel, but to the woman I thought I was. Because even now, weeks later, I still hear Liam's voice in my head. Still feel the way his eyes searched my face. Still remember how it felt to be seen. I didn't cheat. Not technically. But when I see Daniel smile in his sleep, I wonder, would he smile like that if he knew? If he knew that his best friend had looked at me like I was still someone worth reaching for? If he knew I had thought about it again and again, even after Liam walked away? I kept trying to justify it, telling myself it was just a moment, just a slip, just a side effect of loneliness. But the truth is, I asked for it. I wanted it. Even now, I'm not sure if I wanted Liam, or if I just wanted to feel something, anything other than invisible. Was I wrong for suggesting we cross a line? Or was I just a woman trying to feel alive again? Trying to remember what it felt like to be wanted, to be chosen, to be touched not out of obligation, but out of longing. And if that's a sin, I've been repenting in silence ever since. Have you ever stood at the edge of something that could break your world apart? And still felt drawn to it? Felt your body lean forward, while your mind screamed to step back? Have you ever been close to a moment you couldn't take back? Not quite over the line, but close enough to feel its heat. I don't know what you would have done in my place. Maybe you would have walked away. Maybe you would have told yourself it meant nothing. Maybe you would have convinced yourself it was just a lapse, a flicker, a one-time thing. But I stood there. And I didn't walk away. Not right away. So tell me, have you ever tiptoed that close? Not with your hands but with your heart? Tell me in the comments. Your truths. Your regrets. Your near mistakes. I read every single one. No judgment, just honesty. If this story touched something in you, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where silence turns into stories too heavy to carry alone. Tap the bell, because the next one might echo your own. Some betrayals don't begin in bedrooms. They begin in glances, in shared silences, in the aching space between what is and what could have been. And sometimes The scariest truth isn't what we did. It's what we almost did.